What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Eventmasters. This is the show where every single week we take you through a journey from event producer to event master. We bring in some of the best on the planet. This week's no different. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the show, Eventmasters. You need to listen to this if you want to throw bigger and better events. Learn how to monetize and land bigger acts. Yeah, this is where you can learn how to do that. Eventmasters.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to, I think, episode 22? Yes, episode 22 of Event Masters. I am your host, Dylan Schinholzer. Alongside of me, not today, is Patrick Van Dusen. You guys will see him in a couple days or a couple weeks, whenever. He'll pop on. He pops on, pops off. We never know. He's like a thing that's there but never there. It's Patrick. Anyways, welcome to another episode. Good Lord, I can't talk today. Episode of Event Masters. I'm excited about this week. We got a really cool guest. Never really got to meet him until today, so this is going to be an eye-opening conversation for everyone involved. All right? So it's going to be really cool. We're going to be talking about virtual production and what it means to do events in countries and states that are still in lockdown, because we totally get it. Okay, not everybody can do 10,000 person events. Some of you still can't do 10 person events. So we're going to talk about how you can navigate that today. Before we do so, got to get some things off my chest every week. As you guys know, the typical housekeeping, if you don't do it, if I don't ask, make sure you are following, liking, subscribing, all the good stuff, downloading, that's the one I missed. All of us, our new social media handles, we changed them up from Eventmasters Show to @JoinEventmasters. You'll know why, as I said, as the weeks progress, and you'll start to see more of the things we're rolling out about Eventmasters. So @JoinEventmasters on all social medias. Please make sure you're hitting us up on the podcast, Spotify, Apple, soon to be Amazon, all that good stuff if you're audio folks. And then, for those of you tuning in or new to the show, I want to make sure you guys are up to date on what Eventmasters is, just because it's not just a show. I know we're growing every single day, so there's new cats here who don't even know who I am yet. And we'll get into that much later, and you'll hear my story. But I want to make sure you guys are, before we bring on our guests, I want to make sure you still are under the right impression of what Eventmasters is. The story will be told throughout the coming weeks, but Eventmasters is not just a show. It's not just a logo. It's not just the website, the social media handles, or the video content. It's much bigger than that. It's our community effort to elevate this industry, but not just from your event craft or your skill set. There's other verticals that event masters master, not just your craft, but your business and your network. And that three-pronged approach really elevates the entire industry, and it starts with you. So the whole concept of event masters is much more than that. I want to make sure you guys know that. And one of those event masters that embodies all three is with us today. So I'm excited to go ahead and bring up Evan Babbins today, and let's get into it. Evan, how are you?
Oh, hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. I can't complain. I appreciate you coming on here and taking some time out of your schedule. I know as event people and ramping back up, you're probably busy. Getting back to busy, I hope.
Definitely getting back to busy.
It feels good though, right? I mean, I'm doing the same thing. It feels really good to be planning events again.
Yeah, I think the notion of planning the hybrid events into in-person eventually is the excitement, where we're sort of leaving the virtual world, exclusive virtual world, I'll say, which, I mean, obviously was exciting, but doesn't compare to in-person or hybrid.
Yeah, it does not. It's nowhere near it. It's like, I said, it served its purpose, and there's needs and value to the virtual, but we cannot be dependent as event folks. And us event folks, we got into it for the chaos, for the big, massive stages and big, tens of thousands of people, and we just can't get that virtually. So
exactly. It's funny. My favorite part of an event, and I tell everybody this, is your lights are down, show's ready, you're about to open the doors, and you look around and you're like, hey, this full show came to life that was once a drawing on a napkin in some boardroom in the office. And now you're sitting there and you're like, people are about to enter the main room, the main doors are opening in a minute. And you just look around and you're like, wow, we did this, we built this. Mm-hmm. And at one point it was just an idea in someone's head. So you don't get that in virtual, because you're building, when you're building virtually, it's not the same. You don't get that same wow factor as building in a room or in a convention center or, in a conference center that you get in virtual.
Absolutely. I mean, you're right. You cannot replace those feelings, both from an attendee and as an organizer. That feeling of, like you said, when the lights drop and the intro music walks on. That feeling that you get is what you can't replicate. So I love it. So before we get into all the good stuff today, we jumped right into it. So I want to backtrack a little bit and learn about you yourself and how you got to where you're at, what you're currently doing on some projects you're potentially working on. But I would love for you to tell us the quick story about how you became Evan Babbins, getting to this show. How'd you get to the point where you became cool enough for the show?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, thank you for recognizing that I'm cool enough to be on this show.
I totally think you're cool enough.
I feel like I've made it at this point now that I'm on the show. Like now it's like, this is like, I'm done. Like I can retire, go home and be happy. So no.
Well,
so
I appreciate that too, if you feel that way. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, my journey started, 10 plus years ago. I started off DJing. Funny enough, I still DJ, nights and weekends, pre-pandemic life. Now during the pandemic, I've been doing, the Instagram live DJ mixes, that kind of stuff. So I started off DJing. I took that into sort of private event production, working for different event companies around the city in Toronto. I then decided I wanted to see more of the corporate side of things. So I went to work for some hospitality companies around the city in sort of event management and operations. I then went agency side, so corporate event production agency, where I literally went around the world and back for events, saw some really great countries, saw some really great things around the world. I then went sort of client side for a little bit, where I was working for the 7th largest bank in Canada, producing all the events as the event manager for that company. And now I'm working at C2 International, which is another event production agency based in Montreal, Canada. And we produce events internationally for some amazing clients virtually. And now we're moving into sort of the hybrid model. And just really, it's just really been a really great ride to be on so far.
I love it. Yeah, I always joke, because it's funny. You say this, and I think you're like the 4th guest who started out as a DJ. There's something to be said about, I don't know what it is. I come from the DJ world I come from that world. I wasn't a DJ myself. I did it just like at the college bar, but from a standpoint of like, I come from the nightlife world, like in promotions and stuff like that. And as a DJ, besides the music creative, you are a giant promoter and you are in the business of throwing events. So it was just funny. I think you're literally like the 4th one that's come from the DJ world, and you're still in it. It's super cool.
Yeah, I think it's like a good way into the industry. It's a good springboard for a lot of people. For some guys that are still made it through and still full time doing music production and DJing and touring and all that kind of stuff. Pre-pandemic, obviously, it's been great, but I sort of went more sort of corporate event production, with still a little bit on the side to keep my toes in the DJ game.
Right. It's still a hobby. It's probably still what you like to do outside of events.
Exactly.
Yeah. Super cool. I love it. So let's hop into a couple of the topics today that we have isolated out, because you are, like you said, at C2 International, hybrid event or event production company. So I would love to pick your brain on that. And then for those of you joining in now, we're going to also be talking on, if your city or your state or your country is still in lockdown and you can't do big events or small events or whatever it is, what can you be doing, and the ideas and strategies you could still be using in the virtual world until some of these laws and things come down to where we can do events again. So let's start on the production side, and let's keep it on not like the low level foundation, but like the next up of people are coming out of this. And I think a big thing that I'm getting asked about is, where do I start with production when it comes to hybrid events? Like, I don't get it. We've never done it. So I would love to hear from you about a couple things that you would tell someone that's looking to plan a hybrid event this year. What are some things they should be looking for?
Totally. So I think totally it's a great sort of entrance in. I think people have to think about it as really 2 events in one. I think what we're trying to do and what we're trying to develop is sort of your virtual event that people need to access to, who can't make it on site for, lack of comfort or not willing to travel yet, or, companies aren't ready to send staff to events yet representing the company. A lot of companies are in that boat still. So, we're planning this sort of virtual aspect of the event Then we're planning the in-person aspect of the event on this side, where you're doing like what we thought we used to be able to do from, venue site visits and the AV production and the corporate branding and signage and, all this kind of stuff, the on-site badges and all that kind of fun stuff. And then I think the big challenge that we're finding right now, and I think people have to think about, is how do you marry the two, right? How do you have the in-person experience where people are on site watching live, mirrored the experience that you're seeing virtually, and on the next level past that, how do you connect in a networking style people who are virtual only and people who are in person? So, we've seen a couple different tactics that we've seen is there's a wall of iPads, so to say, at the, let's say, general session room. Everyone who's in person grabs an iPad, and on the iPad, you're connected via Zoom or your event app or whatever you're using to connect people, somebody who's virtual. And now that person who's in person is taking the iPad around with them everywhere they're going. And you're like buddied up with someone who's virtual, so they see what you're seeing in the event, in the room, or at the networking area, or at the, gala, whatever you're doing. So it's a cool concept to think about. And that's one way that you can bridge the in-person and the virtual audience in the same event.
I as you said that, like, I'm one of those ones I get ideas and then they start fluttering out in my own weird event brain. That's a really interesting. I hadn't heard that one. I had heard concepts like it, but you almost have like an in-person buddy.
Exactly.
From the virtual audience. I think that's really cool where you could expand upon it, but even if you just kept it as like a one-on-one, like buddy relationship,
right,
it does sort of kind of bridge that gap. I really like that. So what else you got for us? You got any other tidbits like that? I mean, I'm going to write that one down. So
for
I
sure.
know they will.
Yeah. Definitely. No, I think really what we're sort of the biggest challenge that we're finding, in Canada, in Toronto especially, we're coming out very slowly of one of the longest consecutive lockdowns in the entire world. It's been almost 15 months of, no gathering, no, in-person events, in restaurant dining, like nothing at all. So I think the biggest challenge, and a lot of people asking about, is, who's going to be first, right? Who's going to be the first company to take the risk and do the in-person event and hope people will come, and when you're sending out your invitations to that event, or you're sending out your registration, you're sending out to, let's say, 5,000 people for an event, and 50 people say yes because of the comfort level. What do you do at that point? How do you tweak things based on people's comfort level? And when will people's comfort level be at a place where they're ready to travel from Canada to Vegas for an event, or Nashville, or New York, or whatever it is? Because, the borders are finally opening up very slowly. They're not fully open yet, and a lot of people are like, well, the big events obviously happen in the States. We all know that. Or in Europe. I mean, we have some big events in Canada too, but majority of the big ones are there. And, it's going to be a challenge for event producers to bring the international audience back based on people's comfort level. So I think the way you can solve that issue is potentially twofold. Number one, continue for the international events, continue the hybrid model and the virtual model for the international people who are still, needing that virtual only experience. Mm-hmm. And then part two is the people who do come, what do you have to do to go above and beyond to make people as comfortable as you can when they come on site?
Right. No, that's 100. Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that one, because that's what it comes down to. Who is, and you said it fun. You said it. It's going to take that one crazy person in Canada to go, yeah, I want to do it. I'm going to risk it.
Right.
It's the same thing here. Like once you start singing, like in the music festival space down here, the Ooby Dooby Festival, or whatever the heck its name was the first major music or festival to come back, and they prided themselves on it. And they were like, we did fine. Like we proved concept, we did all the safety measures we needed to, and we were back. But it took someone like him for the other ones to start, rolling out, and then Rolling Loud sells 85,000 tickets. Astro World sells 10 or 100,000 tickets. Major conferences are coming back. Dreamforce announced, Coachella announced. So it does just take, I think, in countries like yours, where Canada, I've heard numerous times, it's like, I think you guys just opened up patio seating.
Exactly.
Like
you can sit
something
with
like
4
last week.
people at a patio right now.
Woo!
And that's a big win for us. That's a huge win.
So I think that topic is almost bigger than virtual production, because I think everyone's talking about virtual production. So let's just move right there, because you are dealing with it. You are an international company, of course, but I think a lot of your clients probably do based in Canada and things like that. So in countries like that, what are you talking about? Because we can't obviously talk hybrid models in a lot of parts of the world right now. So where are you at in that discussion, and what are you telling clients?
For sure. So I think right now we're in the virtual only space, with the goal of hybrid into the fall. So, I think, especially in Toronto, like, we're rolling into stage 2, I think July 7th or something, maybe, where you can be with like 25% of the capacity of an outdoor event venue. It's like crazy numbers. But so I think what we're telling people is, let's bank on virtual, because we know that's safe, and we'll plan for in-person with strict numbers. So right now I'm working on a project where we're doing a cross-country tour. We have multiple stops, one in Edmonton, Alberta, which is in the West Coast, Toronto, and then Montreal for the final stop. And we're planning for our in-person events to be basically sort of between 20 and, 100 people, let's call it, at the high end. Because, anything more than that, I don't think is going to be realistic between now and the end of October, when the event happens. As we get into the winter, holiday party season, maybe that's when we'll see changes, assuming things keep going the way they are, where we're doing the vaccine rollouts and people are getting their vaccine and we're getting that herd immunity status. Right. But I think really what we're looking at is into 2022, where we'll see sort of the biggest differences in the large scale events coming back. I would say probably this time next year we'll see the 10,000 people events, if everything continues to go as it's going now. But anything can change at the drop of a hat.
Well, also true. But I do think there's substance to the model you just laid out, though, that you're currently doing, of like the 20 to 100, or even if you're used to doing 15,000, 20,000, and it goes up to 1,000 people. There is something to be said about that more intimate, maybe like VIP in-person experience, where then you didn't broadcast everything out. Because there's in my opinion, almost taking like the talk show vibe of where you go virtual first. Talk shows are built for broadcast, but then they do have that 100-person student audience, or studio audience. Good Lord, I really can't talk today. But I think there's something to be said about that model. It could be a student audience, yeah. So I think, just unpacking out of what you just said, I think there is, though, for those of you listening, some substance to that. Even going back to big person events is I think all of our goals. Like, I can't wait to have 20,000 people at an event again. But there is something to be said about some of these events that you guys are doing, association events or corporate events, where you could have like a VIP in-person experience, smaller, a little bit higher end, but still smaller, so your costs are kind of balance out because you can do more, and then broadcast it out and have that virtual audience.
Yeah, and I think with the broadcast capabilities that we've developed over the last 17, 18 months, I think that's a benefit to companies, because you're now able to attract your VIPs in person, and you can cast your net so wide virtually that you can have, we just did an event, one of our other clients, we had broadcast studios in Europe and in Canada, and we were broadcasting basically simultaneously from both studios. And, the network that we got to reach because of the virtual audience is so much bigger. You have so much more potential for registrations and for networking and people meeting each other who would have never met in an in-person event, where you're seeing the biggest draw to these virtual events is, you can be in Toronto or you can be in New York or wherever, and you can be networking and meeting people in Australia and France and Japan and anywhere around the world, because technology has allowed us to connect in such a seamless way through these virtual events and these virtual event platforms that we've seen developed over the last year and a half. So I think, there's even when in-person events come back, I think there will always be a piece of virtual, because why wouldn't you want to get a bigger audience, more registrations, giving you more income for your event and more revenue for your event and more revenue for your sponsors? Why would you turn that down? You know?
Right. At least look at it as an option. Like
Yeah.
it's I've talked to people, I'm sure you have too, of like, hey, what are you going to do like virtually once you go back in person? They're like, nothing. I'm like,
Exactly.
did you
Like,
think
virtual
about
is
it like
always
at
going to be
all?
there. It'll always be there.
Because I mean, you're never going to get rid of the reach or the awareness that you can build or the FOMO. My favorite reason to go hybrid is the FOMO element and almost using it as a lead gen funnel system. Like, if you don't know me, you're not going to come to my event, but you might buy the live stream or the virtual aspect and then come next year. So
Right.
I think those advantages will never go away, and technology is just going to advance, which means both win better, right? Us platforms
Right.
are going to get better, which means the attendee experience will get better, and more folks will adapt to it from an attendee perspective. Because I think a lot of event professionals are like, yeah, we're going hybrid, but like, it's the attendees who dictate that, not the
Not the
event
producers.
people.
Right. And, I have a lot of conversations with people, all over the world, where they're like, well, the virtual side, if in-person is coming back and in-person is what we're focusing on, will people drop the ball and stop producing the technology for the virtual events and the virtual platforms? And my mind says companies that used to be in person and now are producing virtually, and they developed a virtual event platform, why would they give that up if they haven't even peaked yet?
Right.
I feel like in the virtual event world, we've sort of gone in like waves of things. So we've had like the Zoom and the WebEx sort of wave, and everyone was riding that wave for a while. And then, platforms started to pop up because there was a need for it. And there was things that Zoom and WebEx and whatever couldn't handle. And so, like, the question is, like, what's the next wave? What's coming next? Like, is it hologram technology? Is it VR and AR and all these technologies? Like, how do you blend that into the in-person experience? And I think a good way of that is actually the iPad example, because you're taking someone who's virtual and you're putting them in a real world space via somebody else as the vehicle for it. So I think, and I think there's so many ideas out there. There's so many, great people coming up with new concepts of what does an event look like now? What does it mean to have a hybrid event? What is an in-person event looking like these days? And like, I'm not there yet, so I don't know all the answers for it, but I know when I'm looking around for inspiration, I'm definitely looking to the States to see what's working and what's not working.
Right. Yeah. So I think there's a couple things I want to unpack out of that, and one of them is the outside of the United States, where we're predominantly open. Like you said, you're still like all your international clients, you're still looking at virtual only. And one big thing that I think we did a show a couple months ago, and I'm still very actively pushing this, is the whole idea of how to do a virtual production where everyone's remote, where you don't have like fancy sound stages that we had at Event Next, and you don't have that in-person stage or anything like that. How can those folks still produce quality virtual events? Because that is what I think is hindering the progress of virtual events. It's not the concept or the application. It's the event professional constantly delivering subpar Zoom-like webcam, microphone on the headphone type events. So if we broke that down, what are some things that you've seen, done, or heard where these virtual only folks that also don't have big budgets can apply to just elevate their virtual a little bit better?
Yeah, definitely. So, I think what I used to do, in sort of past companies, even before the pandemic. So I've been producing virtual events since 2017 or so, which is really a crazy story that we can get into later or a different time. But what we saw and what I've been doing all the way through is, we know that the technology that people are using is what makes or breaks the event experience for the audience. So what we've done and what we've typically done before, the last sort of year and a half or so, I would say, is when we have keynote speakers, let's say especially high profile events, high profile people, as part of our event budget, we'll budget for, a pair of AirPods to send to the speaker so we know they have good audio. We'll send them a ring light so we know they have good lighting and they're not getting, backlit or side lit or whatever it is. And that goes a long way. And it's not a huge cost to the event. Let's say you're talking about, a $50,000 event, which is a, pretty healthy budget for a virtual event, I would say. And, you throw in, $2,500 worth of technology that you can send to your 3 main speakers. That experience that the participant will have or the attendee will have will go a long way. And it'll make it seem like you're on a soundstage or you're on stage. You set up a really good green screen, you got a really good background that you've designed and you've developed, and it looks like they're on stage in a conference center or whatever it is. So I think that's definitely something we've done that's tested and makes a lot of sense. And it might cost you a couple bucks to do, but what's your ROI on your event? Like, is it people staying logged in for the entire time because the content and the quality of the content being delivered is top level? Or are you looking at, cheap and cheerful and, headphones built into your microphone or your microphone built into your headphones is good enough for that event? So I think it all depends on the event and the quality of the event that you're looking for. But that's like sort of like a good way of solving that problem.
Absolutely. I think those, I've heard them coined like presenter kits or things like that that can be shipped right to the speaker or whoever.
Yeah,
and
right
then
to my basement.
On that, on that topic, and I'm sure you've seen this, is there's then technology, like, so I send you a green screen, I send you the camera, it's all hooked up, it comes with a nice pamphlet of how to do it all, keeps it super simple, stupid, right? There's another layer to this that I'm sure you've seen, Evan, is I can take, if I'm here, like this is a perfect example, they send me all of this equipment that you're looking at me using now. There's technology then or softwares that allows them to take my body and my green screen and throw it into the same green screen as another remote presenter. So it looks like me and them are together in a virtual environment, but we're in Australia and New York.
Well, I don't know if you saw, Oprah did an interview with Barack Obama, and Oprah was at her house in Chicago, Obama was at his house in Washington, and with that technology, it looked like they were sitting on Oprah's set of her old talk show. And it looked like they were in person, both sitting on like big leather chairs, talking in the same room. And the first time I watched it, I was like, wait a second. Like, this must have been taped, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, whatever. And I looked at it and I was like, no, it was literally filmed like, I think May or June of last year. And it was just like that technology to be able to bring people together to make it look like they're in the same place.
No, I think that's a really interesting, like if I was going to be doing virtual only events and things like that I would be looking at tech like that. It's, it's not always, and I've said this, and I'm sure you agree with me a little bit here, is it's not about engagement features and things like that. Like virtual event and hybrid event production and engagement starts at the production. Like, what are they looking at? What are they hearing? What are you talking about? That's where the engagement starts. And then Q&A, polling, features like that start to matter. But like, if you haven't fixed this yet, then I'm going to log off before I even log in.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that comes back to, the quality of events that are being produced. And, don't get me wrong, there are some really horrible produced events. But I think we've also seen over the last, I would say, let's call it 6 months or so, some really great events being produced. Like, whether it's, large scale companies and you have like, the Dreamforces and the South by Southwest and, those kind of big companies. But then you even have like, there was a lot of, music, musicians and artists that were doing these virtual concerts for a long time that were renting out, sound stages and like live streaming from a soundstage with no audience, and people were just, watching on their computer. And you didn't have the two-way engagement, but the one-way send from the artist was obviously top-level creative and, top-level AV and everything else, because their budgets are obviously astronomical. But it just goes to show you that, like, anything is possible with the right amount of money. and you can make a virtual event look and feel like, we're in any venue around the world if you have the right partners and you have the right budget for it.
Absolutely. And I think there's also something to be said, though, that because you're 100% right. Like if you go look at the, the Billie Eilish live stream or the Dua Lipa one or the Tim McGraw, we're talking like $1.5, $2 million budgets. But then we could break it down to some of our clients, even at ViewStub, where they're local or not, they're international band, but I had never heard of them. But anyways, Electric Six came on our platform, did 4 events and sold, they were telling me they made more money per virtual event than they did to go to in-person events.
Right.
And I'm bringing them up because they did it on very low budget. They went to the venue and said, hey, we'd love to get you some exposure. Can we just play here? Like, we're going to play here. Right. We'll put you on our marketing. And then they brought in, they had a couple camera equipment, but they were able to do it. And the reason I'm bringing this up, on a cheaper scale. Right? You can look at, and why I'm saying this is look at what the big boys are doing. I've always said if you want to be better at hybrid events, study the NFL, study any sporting event really, study the UFC, study the Grammys, because those are hybrid events. They just don't call themselves that.
Exactly.
So I think it's the same thing what you're saying here. Look at the giants of virtual events. Do you have any others that people could maybe learn from? I know there's Dreamforce, South by Southwest. They all did good. Do you know any others off the top of your head?
Yeah. So in Canada, there's a big event. So C2 Montreal is a huge event. I don't want to, give a
plug it away. Plug it away. No, plug it
away. So that was a huge virtual event last year that we did. Was massive, and I think it's going to be probably virtual again at some point. This year as well. So that was huge. There's Collision conference happens in Toronto every year. It's like pre-pandemic, it was like 30,000 people over 3 days. So they did virtual this year, and they had like massive people on that as keynotes. They had like, Akon and, huge names. Usher, I think, did a talk. He has some kind of business that he does. And I think Bill Clinton was on, like, just like really, really, Malcolm Gladwell was on there last year, like huge names, really big names. And they did a really good job. They did in-home production for the sort of panels and the discussions and whatever, but, they sent everybody, a green screen. So all the presenters had the same background, and it was all sort of looked like they were all at the same event.
Love it. I love it. Well, look, people, I got 2 more questions for you, Evan. I got 2 more questions. One is I always finish the show out like this and just making sure that you leave everyone watching this or watching on the replay with whatever tool, strategy, phrase, methodology, theology, whatever it is that you operate by within the event industry. What is that you could give all of us here?
For sure. So I think the biggest thing for me is like never be afraid to try new things. So I consider myself to be a bit of a trendsetter in the industry. I'm never afraid to bring up some new concept or new technology or new way of looking at something. So never be afraid to try something. The worst case happens that it flops and you try something new, it's never a bad thing. And then, I look at my sort of event life mantra is like, you're only as good as your last event. Whether your event was a complete success or a complete failure, you're only as good as your last event, and your next event will be even better than the last one. So that's sort of my 2 guiding principles, I would say.
It's perfect. Perfect. The first one is that, and I might have to steal the second one, but the first one is one of the mantras or life, operational life hacks of Eventmasters is don't be afraid or don't be afraid to try new things, like innovate, don't imitate or innovate, don't imitate is the actual phrase of it. So I'm with you 100%. I love it. That's why you're on this show, because you embody things like that. And I hope more folks embody that, because I'm sure me and you've seen the same cookie cutter things over and over and over again, because people don't have this mindset. And that's what Eventmasters is, guys. It's not necessarily about the tactical stuff. It's sometimes about the mindset shifts that you have to make before you can even get tactical. I can teach you all day about virtual event production, and so can Evan here. And we can tell you about presenter kits. We can tell you about green screens and better mics. But until you take that shift and thinking, I have to spend money on production. I have to be good experience. I have to, try new things. I'm going to bring in that crazy tech where me and Evan can be in the same virtual room, right? I'm going to try these things, but you have to make that mindset shift first to make sure that you're willing to take those steps. So one more question for you. Where can we find you? And anything you do, this is your selfless plug. So I know you didn't want to plug C2 International, but this is your chance.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm on LinkedIn, Evan Babbins, on Instagram at DJESB. And I'll put that, I guess we can put that maybe in the comments or something. And C2 International is on LinkedIn as well. And we're just, I'm really happy to have been here. I'm really happy to have been part of this. And, I hope this isn't the last conversation we have together.
Absolutely. Good Lord, I really can't talk. Absolutely not. I think there's plenty of more content. We can break down even more. So this was, as you guys know, a pretty high level. I would love to do some more content, written, audio, video, whatever it is, man. We'll definitely figure that out, as I was saying before the show. So, folks, hope you guys liked episode 22 of Event Masters. I'm Dylan Schinholzer. Our new social media handles are at Join Event Masters. Website coming soon. Download the podcast app. Apple, Spotify, soon to be Amazon, all that good stuff. Right? Just make sure you're liking, subscribing, engaging, and excited. We will also drop the wait list for the mastermind. For those of you who are aware of that, you'll see that. That's coming out, I think, sometime early summer. And with that being said, Evan, once again, very much thank you. Very much appreciate it. Excited to do some more stuff with you. This was literally, as we said, first time me and him have ever met, ever even chatted more than a LinkedIn comment. So excited. This is the kickoff of a cool relationship. So Evan, once again, like I said, thank you. We'll see you guys on the next episode.